Let's take a look at a quadratic equation and see if we can use the methods we've used in the past to solve this. The first thing that I'm noticing is that square roots are not going to be an effective way to solve this problem because there's an x term in the problem. We only use square roots when there was an x squared term, so square roots is out as an option. The other thing that I could try is to factor this. I would need to make my equation equal to 0, and so I'd say x squared minus 8x minus 4, because I'm subtracting the 20, is equal to 0. And then if I were to factor this, you'll recall, I need two numbers that multiply to -4 and add up to -8. Well, the only factors of 4 are 1 and 4 and 2 and 2, and I can see that there's no way I'm going to be able to get those numbers to add up to -8. So I cannot solve this with methods that I know how to do or use already. So instead, let's use a new method. Let's do something called completing the square. Before we get to it though, let's do a sort of little baby step to the problem, a mini step, and that is to find a C value. I call it the magic number, but let's see what the C value is and what makes it magical. So off to the side here, I have a little formula that we're going to use to find the C value. It's going to be to take our B term, the coefficient of x, divide it by 2 and square it. So let's go ahead and try that on this first trinomial. So my B value is 16. So I'm going to take 16 and take half of that. And there's a reason I'm writing my work out, so don't fear. There's a purpose to this. And then square that value. So half of 16 is 8. 8 squared gets me 64. So my magic number is 64. Now we don't know yet why it's magical, but we'll get to that in a second. So C is the number I want for that problem. In a case where our B value is odd, we're not going to switch to decimals, we're going to stick with fractions. So my B value is -9. I'm going to take half of that and square it. Well, if the number does not divide evenly, like in this case we have an odd value, don't actually get a decimal, leave it the way it is, and the way you square a fraction is multiply the top times itself. So -9 times -9 is positive 81, and then 2 times 2 gets you 4. So the magic number this time is 81 over 4. You'll notice that the magic number is always going to be positive because we're squaring that number in parentheses. Here's what makes it magical. What I want to do now is I want to go back and try to factor this problem that we now have a magic number for. So if I look for two numbers that multiply to 64, and at the same time add up to 16, I see those numbers are going to be 8 and 8. And so I'm going to factor this as x plus 8 times x plus 8, or rather I could just say that this is x plus 8 squared. That's what it means to complete the square. Finding the magic number gets us something that always factors this way. Notice too that the value that this problem factored into, the 8, was that value we had in our middle step at the beginning, the number we had after we divided by 2, but before we squared it. So that's important to note for when I try to factor the second problem. We already found its magic number. I now need two numbers that multiply to 81 over 4, but add up to -9, and I have absolutely no idea what those numbers are. But remembering that trick, that middle number is what it's going to factor into, I can use that to easily factor this. It's going to factor into x minus 9/2. That's what I had after I divided by 2, but before I squared it. We didn't actually divide it because we didn't want a decimal. And I know that this completing the square works because it's going to be that thing times itself. So x minus 9/2 squared is what this will factor into. Notice that that value could be negative, but our magic number will always be positive. So that's how we find the C value. Let's, in our next video, take a look at how we actually use that to then solve a quadratic equation.